Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy, you could never look at my secret. Oh no, suddenly, hello, Libby. Let's begin. Indeed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is the Fireside Chat. And today we have a returning guest, a friend of the channel, Justin Trottier of the Canadian Centre for Men and Families. Welcome to the show, Justin. How are you?
I'm great. Always glad to be with you, Brian. And thanks for your interest in our work.
Absolutely. I like that you're getting into the season. You have like a sweater. It's sweater season over here too. I guess in Canada it's a little bit more.
It's actually sweater. Toque and glove season, and I don't yet have those supplies. I'm always a little bit behind the weather, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, so this is not just like sort of like a check-in to see how you're doing, although it is good to see you, and I understand that you and your family are doing well. I'm friends with your wife on Facebook for some reason. I see pictures of her baby, your baby, all the time. So that's really awesome.
Not so much of a baby anymore as she would tell me. She's 6 now. Stop calling me a baby. Stop saying I'm so cute.
Well, she'll always be your baby, right?
Absolutely.
So you guys have been like really knocking it out of the park lately. And a while back, I got the opportunity to speak to Tanis Moore, which we know as Prim Reaper online. She's been doing a lot of work for your Alberta branch, which you guys have recently opened up. And I understand now you're working on, or maybe you've already done it. I have up here your Vancouver location. What's going on? Like how are things going with the with your new initiatives?
Oh my God, it's been an exceptionally busy year. I feel like I say that all the time, but it's always true that each year is kind of busier than the one before in terms of what our vision is, and in terms of the support that we're getting in the community to be able to actually realize this vision. So what happened, just breaking news really in the last couple of weeks, is that we opened the first of its kind emergency family shelter for fathers and children in Alberta. So it's in Calgary, but it's the first and only one in Alberta. In fact, it's the first and only one in Western Canada. We opened the first in Toronto, Ontario, about 3.5 years ago. So that's been going very well. We've had over 300 families stay there. We have like a big house basically that we maintain. But in Calgary, just because the market is much cheaper, frankly, we were able to buy a building. So it's an order of magnitude larger in terms of the scope. We can actually support as many as 40 people in this building once it's at full capacity, and that'll take some time. We really just did a ribbon cutting ceremony actually on International Men's Day, so just a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
And it was great. It was covered by the press, the CBC, CTV, the main Canadian national press was all there for that. And it's been very overwhelmingly positive media exposure, which, as you know, we haven't always enjoyed at the Centre for Men and Families. So that's a nice change. Yeah, it's been a great time.
It's like there's been, I don't know, like a little over time, there's been more and more openness to these issues and to taking them kind of seriously, huh?
Definitely. And I think, because of the tangibility of the work we do, people can actually see the programs, they can talk to the clients, and in this case, the residents who are actually benefiting. They can see it's benefiting not just these men, but also their kids, also in some cases their spouses, their friends and family members of all genders. They get the sense that this is truly, a holistic and inclusive project, which is supporting at this point thousands and thousands of families. And so it becomes harder and harder to dismiss that, argue that it's a misogynist organization or it's not really doing any good. It's really just kind of whining and complaining when you actually can talk to the people, the thousands of families now who have benefited in very tangible ways. And I think that's why we're seeing a change from the media, from the social service sector. We got a lot of partners among other nonprofit organizations. That's a big part of why we've been able to make these accomplishments happen.
Yeah. And So like how this growth that you guys are seeing, like, so, things were slow moving for a while, and now it seems like this kind of like steady, I don't know, wave or stream of need and your ability to sort of respond to that. Has that like had an effect on your perception of what the problem was? Like, if you think about yourself when you were starting this, and like how hard it was to get funding and like, get people on board and get support compared to where you are now, how much do you think that's affected your perception of these issues?
Yeah, Center for Men and Families has always been an optimistic, kind of forward-looking organization, and always looking for opportunities and looking for ways of finding creative solutions, right? And we're also celebrating our 10-year anniversary, so it's kind of a good time for me to wax a little bit historical, looking at, just to answer your question, where we came from, where it was so difficult to get anything, funding, volunteers, etc., partners from other agencies. And now, I won't say it's easy, but definitely a lot of that groundwork, that platform that we built, is now bearing some fruit. And so, at this point, we're getting calls from other organizations, calls from the media. We don't have to go out there as assertively as we used to do. Those doors are starting to slowly open. I will say it's still very tough to get government support. And we've had some very positive meetings with like the Minister of Community Services in Alberta, and actually a similar ministry in Ontario is actually looking at doing some really groundbreaking new programs for men and boys. They're looking at expanding their crisis lines, and this is really exciting. So we're now in potential talks with other community organizations, including some women's organizations in Ontario, to do some partnerships and then to work with government for the first time on some new developments. But there's still nothing absolutely solid in that area. So there's still a lot of work to be done. So I don't want to suggest that like we've solved everything, not at all. Still a ton of work to do, but there's a feeling of momentum that has been building the last year in particular.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was getting at. It's like, it felt like a Sisyphean task, but it seems like now, you're getting a little bit more push, a little bit more help, more people get on board. I noticed, like you have a reasonably sized team of people. I was looking at the website you sent me. And I assume that's not everybody, but like, is it like the whole thing seems to be growing? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, so we've got hundreds of volunteers. We've got a footprint that is thousands of families every year, that we interact with, that we provide some tangible support to. We've got 8 paid staff at this point, which is small, but compared to, I think, certainly compared to where we were a few years ago, and compared to many men's issues organizations or fathers' rights organizations, which often don't have any staff at all, sustaining a staff of anywhere from 8 to 10 full-time people at any given time is a considerable accomplishment, and it does take quite a bit of effort to raise the funds to do that. And those are essential staff. They're providing essential programs. They're doing the outreach that is critical for our growth. And so we're trying to maintain the budget to make the organization continue to function. And then we've also got some pretty, ambitious and lofty future-oriented plans. You asked about Vancouver. Our goal is to be in 3 provinces. No, I should back up and say we're actually already in many provinces, but we don't have really boots on the ground physical infrastructure the way we do in Ontario and Alberta. Those have been our 2 main kind of bases of operation. We've had a branch in Vancouver for a long time, and we do a lot of virtual programs, and we do some outreach in terms of community building. What we'd like to do, though, is to open the third of its kind family residency in or around Vancouver within the next 1 to 2 years. So to do that, it's a very ambitious project. These residencies are critical. They're saving lives, but they also cost about $1 million in capital just to get them off the ground. So our vision is to be in the 3 provinces, Alberta, Ontario, and BC within 2 years' time. If anybody's watching this and is interested in making that happen, there's definitely an opening for some financial support. This is the right time. We're doing our usual end of year match. In fact, there's a quadrupling that's on for a short period of time. So you could be the one that helps us, open those doors. But that remains as a vision for the organization on a going forward basis.
Yeah, very exciting, and yeah, BC. If I remember correctly, I don't know if this is really comparable, but property is really expensive there and right now, so you're definitely going to need help on that one.
Exactly.
So I got a super chat, and I wanted to tell you guys, if you're watching and you want to send a message to Justin, so you can send a super chat by just going into YouTube, or you can send us a Rumble rant over on Rumble. Or if you want to make sure that we get most of your support, you can send us a super chow at feedthebachelor.com/justthetip. There's a link in the description to that. So Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 Canadian. Thank you, Albert. And he says, Justin, congrats on your success. Did you by chance win the $80 million from the Lotto Max last night? If not, I should probably check my ticket. I think that's a half joke, but hoping that, if somebody wins and you want to help out, that would be great. So thank you for that. Justin, for people who don't know, because we are reaching more people now than we have previously, thank goodness. For some reason, our videos are finally getting out to like more and more people. So there are people asking questions about who we are and what we do. What is the Canadian Centre for Men and Families? What do you guys do? What are your services? And why is this such an important thing to support?
Yeah, we're a pretty unique organization. We have a really kind of unapologetic focus on boys and men on their own terms. So, you have organizations that claim to focus on boys and men, but when you dig a little bit deeper, that their goal really isn't to improve the well-being of boys and men. They're kind of, frankly, boys and men are a target population, but their goals lie elsewhere. And I think you can sense where I'm going with that. But we're it's not all that difficult, but we're very unapologetically focused on the needs, the problems, the issues and perspective of boys and men. And what we do is we look at where are the gaps? Where are the gaps in programs and services and support that are really life and death, that would make the biggest impact in the lives of real people, real families, if we were to fill those gaps, right? So I'm talking about suicide prevention. I'm talking about homelessness, addiction. I'm talking about family violence. And when I say life and death, I mean, family violence includes domestic homicides. Those happen to men. In fact, just as a brief aside, we have been tracking in Canada anyway, homicides involving a female who perpetrates homicide against a male spouse or a child, and those are going up. We've noticed that in the last 2-3 years, those have gone up relative to previously. And just in the last month alone in Toronto, there were 2 tragic fatalities where a mother killed her newborn child, and in one case burnt down the house to do that. And wow. The fathers called it in, but unfortunately, tragically, they were too late in getting the police's attention. We're trying to find out what was going on behind the scenes. I'm very, suspicious about what was going on. I have, my intuition is that, these fathers were probably asking for help for a while before these tragic outcomes. And the help isn't there. There are no shelters for fathers and children. Even if a dad wants to take his child to safety, he has very few, if any, options for where he can go. The police do not take men seriously when they call and ask for help around family violence. They're often going to arrest the man. That happens all the time, even when he's the victim. So there are preventable tragedies when I talk about life and death issues, not only affecting men, but also very tragically kids and even infants. So those are the issues we care about. We're very unique in that that's our focus. And we're successful at doing it. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk, and we've done some amazing things. I think we've opened, first of their kind facilities. I'm pretty sure these don't exist elsewhere in Canada. We've been looking, and I wish that wasn't the case, but I'm pretty sure that we can claim to have opened these as the first organization to do so, and as well as many other programs that we offer around mental health supports, parental supports of various kinds, legal clinics, etc. But the philosophy is to find the gaps where they exist and where they're going to make the most impact, and then sort of systematically bringing in new programs and new supports to try to make the most good in our communities.
And you were just talking about this. Do you guys also do or have people that do research on the kind of data that you would use to make the argument for, will we need this? Here is a gap that needs attention, like you were just pointing out. Do you guys have a research team or resources for people? I'm looking at your website right now. I was going to ask some questions about that, but I thought I would ask that first.
Yeah, for sure. Off of the homepage, there's actually a button that says Get Informed. informed. And if you hit that, it'll take you to research papers. And some of these are actually primary research. Like we've actually gone in. One example is, and we got a federal government grant to do this, which is unusual. As I said earlier, we don't typically get government support. We actually did get a government grant to look at the intersection of homelessness and family violence as it affected men, right? So we have, all these domestic violence shelters, presumably because we know that there are people who are both homeless and struggling with family violence, and that might be one of the primary causes of homelessness. But those shelters are almost exclusively for women. And so it was a research project to determine to what extent men are being made homeless because of family violence or the threat of violence. So we had some funding, and we went into 6 Toronto homeless men shelters, and we surveyed these men, and something like 60% or thereabouts of men indicated that family violence was at least one factor, or the primary factor that caused them to be homeless. That's available on our website. We've done research around, parental alienation and what the causes and consequences are. And then recently, we actually just completed a primary research project involving a survey of false allegations. We wanted to look at what are the prevalences and the consequences of false allegations especially in family court settings, but not exclusively family court. And that's kind of breaking news. We've just received the data from Nanos. It was a collaboration between my agency, and then we commissioned Nanos, which is an independent research agency, to actually do the research, because we didn't want people to, doubt the veracity of our claim, because, obviously we've got some skin in the game, right?
Right.
So we commissioned it, we gave them sort of their directions, but then they actually did the research, and that is just coming available to us. So I'm not really in a position to share the findings yet. We really just got our hands on in the last couple of weeks, but the data is very suggestive. I'll put it that way. I'll certainly be publicizing that. That'll be on our website as well. We'll probably do some YouTube videos around it as well when that data's been analyzed and sort of interpreted a little bit.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, well, I think more data is definitely useful to help us, sort of back, our claims here, and it's definitely constructive. So let's talk about some of the programs you guys have here for men. I want to ask you about. There's something called a men's peer support group. I think it's self-explanatory, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about like what that is and how it's unique.
Yeah, it's probably one of our flagship programs. This one has really taken off, and we used to have men's peer support groups at all of our different offices and centers, but a lot of our programs went online during the pandemic. And what happened is that they exploded, because being online, it meant you could participate anywhere in the world. I mean, we're mostly Canadian based, but we do have clients who come from the States and from Europe and elsewhere. But with geography not being a barrier anymore, we now have upwards of 100 men every week who are in these programs. It's not a single group, but we have almost every night there's a group of men that are meeting, and we provide them with some support, but it's mostly being self-organized. They're mutual support groups. So it's often what happens is men who have been in crisis, they then attend the program, and they might attend for maybe weeks or months or years or whatever they need. And then some of them decide that they want to give back. And so we then train them to become facilitators, and then they take over, and then they will then train the next generation of facilitators. It's an amazing, beautiful program in the sense of it's men supporting each other. But we do provide, obviously, some supervision to make sure that it's, not everybody can facilitate a support group. You have to have the right sort of temperament and experience. So we're very keen, we're very watchful of that. But largely the group does kind of manage itself, and you just get a lot of beautiful kind of friendships that are formed out of that kind of infrastructure.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And I've advocated for men's groups for a very long time, so it's good to see that that's being supported, and it's actually bearing some fruit. So that's sort of like is very validating. So and what's Nexus Recovery? It says male survivors of domestic abuse or intimate partner violence. Nexus Recovery.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with this one. It's come of age in the last year or two. So we have a number of support programs. The men's peer support group, which I was just referencing, is kind of a general purpose drop-in program. Come whenever you need it, whenever you've got issues or crises or what have you. The Nexus is more thematic. So we've got a number of programs that are really focused on particular issues. So this one is looking at family violence. So these are male identified, anybody who's male identified, who's been struggling with, maybe they're currently dealing with family violence, maybe they're, they've come out of a domestic violence relationship, but they're still obviously processing the trauma. And so men who are dealing with any form of family violence, we interpret that very broadly, are at home in the Nexus Recovery Program. And this is also a very popular program. Unfortunately, I suppose that it is needed. But, we've got maybe a few dozen men who are participating at any one time. It is more structured. So men participate for a 12-week session, and they can obviously come back and they can redo that. But there's a curriculum. It's mutual support, but then there is actually a curriculum and a set of educational modules that we work through during that 12 weeks cycle.
And I assume that the domestic abuse is not exclusive to physical abuse, but also emotional, psychological, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
relational,
all of the above, relational, administrative, financial, sexual. Even there are men who are victims of sexual abuse within relationships, sometimes from other men, sometimes from women, but all of that. So very broadly defined. Yeah. And I should say the shelters, the housing that we provide, there's emergency shelters. There's also longer term transitional housing that we're providing as well. But there too, the eligibility is very broad. So any form of any form of family abuse or family violence, would qualify a family for access to those spaces.
And you guys also offer, it looks like, legal assistance with things too?
Yep. That's been one of the longest running programs. Definitely saw the need for more legal supports, especially family court. No surprise to a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, that dads have a hard time in family court. And we want to provide, the best possible legal advice. We don't provide legal representation. We do have lawyers that we can refer men to, but in-house, it's a legal clinic. So it means that we have lawyers who are really experts in their area and very experienced in supporting fathers and supporting men. So we don't just bring anybody into that. These are lawyers we've really vetted, and they are maybe the exception in terms of being very father-friendly or male-friendly. And they come in on a weekly basis. Men can just drop in and get their legal questions answered. It's been a very popular program from the beginning. As I said, we have our ear to the ground. We're looking at what are the gaps that our clients are telling us. That they're sometimes very insistent, you need this program. There's nothing like this available to us. And then we do the research to back up with a needs assessment. But we're often first hearing from the men themselves. We have a new program, it's maybe just a couple of years old, called Survivors of False Allegations. And this is very unique. I'm not aware of any other agency that provides this. But this is a program where men who were involved in the other services, they kept telling us, we need something specifically to deal with false allegations. How do you navigate that? And so
that's a tough one.
Yeah, it's very challenging. And so we developed a program to address that particular gap.
So what is, can you talk a little bit, I was going to mention that one next because I see that here, SOFA, Survivors of False Allegations. What kind of help do you, I don't know, because I think that being accused of something like that is its own kind of abuse and trauma if it's false. Totally. Right? And so this is a thing that men struggle with. So what would the support look like? How would you even begin to do that?
Yeah, and I just want to back up what you said. We absolutely believe that false allegations is a form of family violence. Again, I don't want to get into too much about the research we just did because it requires some analysis and interpretation. But just broadly speaking, it looks like the rates are comparable to other forms of family violence. To physical violence, to emotional violence. False allegations is one very prevalent way that people gain an advantage over others. Maybe in the context of family breakup and family courts and fighting for access or fighting to keep the other parent from accessing children, you get false allegations sort of thrown in as a weapon. So the research that we will present in the coming weeks will go into more of what we've learned in terms of how false allegations are being weaponized and being used to gain those kinds of advantages. But so the SOFA program, it's a hybrid. It combines different offerings. Part of it is legal, right? So if you're dealing with false allegations, especially in the context of family court or even sometimes criminal court, if the allegations are of that kind, we provide access to both family law and criminal law lawyers who can help you navigate that. But part of it is, tools and tricks for how to deal with these false allegations in your day-to-day life, right? Because these things are not only being used against you in the courtroom, they're also sometimes being used to hurt your reputation at your place of work, right? Or with your family and friends. So it goes beyond just the legal domain, the sort of, tools that we provide men with to navigate around this area. And then part of it is also a bit psychological. And that has to do with how men themselves, need to prepare themselves for what's to come. And if you're not in the right frame of mind, it's very difficult to deal with false allegations. So part of it is, how to balance yourself in order to be mentally and emotionally, ready to deal with the onslaught of false allegations. So you got the psychology of it, you've got, legal tricks, you've got, other tools that we try to provide to the men. So as I said, it's a bit of a hybrid of many different things. And we're also advocating for these men. So what we do is we look at, what are some policies that currently are making it easier for people to get away with false allegations? And we're actually trying to change the law where it's working to harm men.
Like basically trying to create a higher standard of evidence and due process for men so that you can't just do that. It's not even about how frequent it is. It's the idea that it can be done and that it can have these effects, even if it, at least on the legal level, right?
Exactly. Right now, we're actually incentivizing people to do false allegations. The way our family courts work, the way the police don't listen to men when they make accusations, that they've been victims, but they believe anything basically that a woman claims, like that double standard. These are all actually enshrined in law or in policy, and they work basically to incentivize false allegations against men and disincentivize men from speaking up when they've actually been victims, right? So it's a complete double standard that is enshrined in policy and law and does require an advocacy approach. We basically need to bring men together. There needs to be an organization to do that, because we hear from individual men, but they're not organizing. Somebody needs to organize these men to potentially do like class action lawsuits against the police or other authorities that are guilty of these kinds of, harmful incentives. So that's also part of SOFA. It's more, that advocacy wing of the organization, but obviously it connects to the social services because that's where we hear from the guys who are in these kinds of situations.
I got a super chat, a couple more super chats I'm going to read on a super chow as well. Albert Data Retro gives us 2 super chats, both $5 Canadian. Thank you, Albert, and says, this is going to be in 2 parts. He says, Justin, remember the homeless guy maybe 2 years ago, deleted by a group of teen girls in the news, a week's, then nothing. What's up with that? Then he follows up and says, follow-up guy's name was Ken Lee, and the 8 girls pled guilty. So I don't know that story, but
that was about 2 years ago. There was a swarming of 8 young girls. I forget how. I mean, some of them were teenagers. Some of them were younger than teenagers. I forget how young some of them were, but and they swarmed a homeless man and killed him. And we've been tracking that story, and we've been tracking a number of the other tragedies. I mentioned earlier some recent events where a mother murdered her infant. So we have a team that will go to the courtroom, because one of the problems is that the media is completely failing on this. They lose interest in these cases, and when there's a complete double standard. So when there's a tragedy involving a woman who's murdered by her husband, and these are all equally tragedies, by the way, but what happens is that the media is very covers that very closely, right? And they want to know who failed that woman? Like, did the police fail her? Did Children's Aid fail her? Did victim services fail her? They want to look at the history leading up to that moment. They want to understand, was there a history of her trying to get help and help wasn't there? And that's good. That's exactly what they should be doing. They should be doing it when a woman kills a man too, right? And so there was a case earlier this year where a woman murdered her fiance, her male fiance. He was older than her. He was also much, in much poorer health than her. And she sort of used that to her advantage. She actually threw him over the stairs, and that's how he died. Wow. And you don't know that because that wasn't covered by the media, unbelievably. I mean, that part of it.
Well, believably.
There was a story the day it happened, and then the media hasn't covered it since. So the way he died, the brutality of that, they don't cover it. I was actually in court to hear, firsthand what happened, and that's how I know, because there was no media there with me to cover it, and they just, as I said, they've lost interest in that story. That is a complete dereliction of the journalistic responsibility, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, these events are happening. There has been at least half a dozen cases in Toronto just in the last 18 months involving a woman who murdered her husband and or her children. They get news, they make the news the day it happens, but then nobody asks those systematic questions about what led to this. And then there's very little updates from the media as the case progresses through the courts. That's why we created a team that's actually going to the court, and so that we can get that sort of firsthand report of what exactly happened. And where this is headed is we want to stop these tragedies from happening. We're trying to make the case to the city of Toronto and other municipalities and provinces that this is happening because they have failed to provide essential support to men, fathers, and their children. And they need to open up shelters. They need to expand life-saving victim support services. Obviously, we think they should work with our agency because we're already doing some of this, but not nearly enough to prevent these tragedies. We need governments to step up. And it doesn't help when the media just ignores these and doesn't see any interest in doing more than just, very, very cursory coverage of these incidents.
Yeah. Do you guys keep records of these things, or maybe I don't know, like an archive or something of these incidents, since the media doesn't report on them?
Yeah, we do that. Some of that's available on our website. There's some other organizations we work with who that's really their focus, is sort of doing that investigative journalism that the journalists aren't doing. And so we link to some of their websites, and we also provide some of our own analysis as well. Yeah, but it has really been increasing, unfortunately, the last couple of years, these kinds of incidents.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and so that's why we've decided to really, invest some resources in tracking them, and not just tracking them, but as I said, educating policymakers and the media and the general public that these incidents are increasing, with an eye to developing the resources and the services to address, these issues before they lead to the tragedies and the tragic outcome.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got another some other things to read out really quick. So Richard Bier gave us $5 through the Super Chow, and he says, if you want to more easily get government funding, just tell them that you need a grant to study the effects of cocaine on small rodent behaviors. The people in your shelters are to be declared to be your research assistants. I think he's making a dig at the way government spends money, which is usually not in the right direction. And then Albert Nader Retro gives us $5 Canadian, says, Wikipedia, 3 of the suspects were age 13, 3 were 14, and 2 were 16. I understand it was over a bottle of booze. All right, thank you for that, Albert and Richard. So I wanted to go back to your programs really quick. I know that we're running out of time here because you got to get going to another thing, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us a little bit. So I wanted to look at this thing called Fueling Fathers and something called Buddy Coach. I don't know if these are sort of related in any way, but these are 2 of your other programs that sort of caught my eye. So you tell us a little bit about that.
I can comment on that and just sort of generalize to some of the other areas of our service offerings.
Yeah.
There's a number of father-focused programs that we provide. So Fueling Fathers is one. There's one called Triple P Parenting and Fathering After Separation or Divorce. I mean, they're very much related. They're all focused on, empowering fathers, especially in the context of separation and divorce. They just they're for slightly different situations, and they appeal to slightly different, you know, populations of fathers. But that's a key area for us, is supporting dads in the context of family breakup. In terms of coaching, there's a number of programs we're getting into that are more, you know, we do a lot of psychotherapy, so we're not down on that at all. But for a lot of men, they're in need of things kind of beyond that clinical approach. So, you know, coaching and life skills training, and we think that that's particularly attractive to younger men, which is a new kind of frontier for us, is getting more into programming for male youth. We're trying to, you know, support boys and young men who are at failure to launch, and support them when they're having to make critical, you know, pivotal life decisions, and they could go, you know, one way or they could go another, and some ways are much healthier and more positive than others, and we want them to make the right healthy decision, not just for them, you know, but for also their loved ones, their future families. That's, you know, and actually that analysis that I mentioned, tracking the tragedies that are happening across Canada, and I'm very laser focused on Toronto just because it's a major population center, and it's my, you know, my own community. And you look at who's dying, and these are overwhelmingly young, often racialized males. That's who's being gunned down in Toronto. These are Black boys, basically, and nobody's declaring an epidemic of that. And it is an epidemic, and we should be talking in that kind of language. It's just, you know, the background noise of our society is the suffering of boys and men, and it's so ubiquitous and so perennial that we just take it for granted. And I want to stop taking for granted the tragic and preventable deaths of these young males. So that's an area that we're looking at, both from a research lens, but also from a positive service intervention lens as well.
Sounds like Chicago. And I'm not saying that jokingly. That's what it's, that's Chicago is the same. All right. So, we're getting close to the end here, so I wanted to ask you, how are you getting things funded? Where is your funding coming from? Where does most of your support come from? And where can people who are watching be directed if they want to be, you know, to help you guys out?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question very much. We got off the ground as an organization purely from private capital. And look, I not philanthropists, like not people who can cut giant checks, but I mean thousands of individuals who have given, you know, $5. You've got a bunch of people who gave $5 today. We love that. I mean, we're mostly small dollar, a lot of talk about smaller dollar donors, right? But that is really how we got off the ground. And to this day, you know, we still are growing as an organization because of a mass of small dollar donors. So we absolutely need those. And right now we're doing a quadrupling campaign. So we do have a couple of larger donors, and what they're doing is they're trying to leverage their big gifts. They're going to quadruple any gifts that come in until Friday. And to the end of the year, we're going to continue with our usual annual doubling. So in other words, you know, give whenever you can, but we do appreciate, you know, you renewing your donations in the light of the holidays, and us having some pretty big visionary plans for 2025. Now is really a good time for us to benefit from your largesse, because we want to put those funds towards some future-oriented programs in the new year. I was talking about the male youth programs, the expansion of housing and emergency shelters for fathers and children. If you donate between now and the end of the year, that's where that money is going to go. So now is a great time to make a gift. And we do count on those private supporters. It's absolutely essential. You can go to our website, menandfamilies.org. There's a donate button there at the top.
And as another link I saw when I was just searching, I don't know if this is you, I think it is, there's a Patreon page, a Canadian Centre for Men and Families Vancouver, and it has various membership levels. Are those like, did those also go towards the funding? Because I see that there's like special, I guess they're podcasts or something by Prim. That's Tanis Moore, who's watching the show. Hi, Tanis, I saw you. And she has a series called Perspectives on Men. That could be very interesting, as well as some other, they look like articles, perhaps, support for male survivors of sexual abuse, male body image, Big Brother's mentoring, things like that. So is that also, did I just shill somebody else, or is that part of your thing too?
We're a pretty broad-based organization. Perspectives on Men, yeah, that's a fairly recent addition to our various programs. That's a podcast that is on YouTube, youtube.com/@menandfamilies. That's our landing page on YouTube, and you'll find episodes of Perspectives on Men, which is mostly an interview-based show. And we also put up a number of other miscellaneous kind of news and current affairs content. In fact, just a quick plug, we opened the facility in Calgary, this first of its kind interim housing for fathers and children. We've done tours and we've done opening events. Those are up on our YouTube channel as well. We've done some videos around the 10-year celebration of CCMF. Those are on YouTube. And there will be another event that will be on YouTube, but you could actually still watch it live. And that is, we have a special guest appearance from Cassie Jaye, who I'm sure a lot of your audience is familiar with.
We love Cassie. We love Cassie.
Yeah, so Cassie's been great to us as well. We've had her as a speaker, but it's been a while. And so she will be returning to help us celebrate the 10 years of Center for Men and Families on December 19th. And so if you go to our website or if you contact me, we'll send you information on that.
Very nice. Yeah, definitely. We'll share it with everybody. Maybe somebody can even, I don't know if they can buy tickets or like how it works.
It's a free event. We do encourage donations, of course, but the event itself is free of charge. It's on Eventbrite. Yeah, I'll forward you the link and we can get it out to your great.
Yeah, it'd be great. And where is this, Vancouver or is this in Alberta?
Online. It's an online event.
It's online.
Yeah,
okay.
On the evening of December 19th.
I see. All right, cool. All right, well, thank you, Justin. Is there anything that I forgot to ask you or that you wanted to say? Any final words you got for the audience?
No, I think we've had a very broad-based conversation and gotten out my messages. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. I hope that you will continue to enjoy some success. I think that you guys are doing really good work, and I don't know. It just seems like so much has changed and improved in the 10 years that I've been working at HBR, and that is really promising. I did get one last super chat from Albert Nader Retro, who gives us $5 Canadian again, and he says, Brian, did you grow up in Cabrini Green? Did you ever say Candyman 5 times into the mirror? I did not grow up in Cabrini Green, but I went to a high school very close, and I dated a girl who lived there. And do not recommend. But anyway, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. Thank you, Justin, for taking the time to hang out with us and share in all the work that your organization is doing. And if you guys want to check out what they have, I have links in the description of this video, so you can check out the work that the Canadian Center for Men and Families is doing. And thank you so much for coming on the show. So if you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat, and we will talk to you guys in the next video.
Are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.